spring of 1851, 12-year-old Jeremiah Holbrook made a discovery that would haunt him forever. Working in the cramped back room of Fletcher's funeral parlor in Sutters Creek, California, he had developed an unusual obsession counting the bodies. By May, his tally reached 43. But the town's official records listed only 27 deaths. That meant 16 men had vanished without explanation. No records, no funerals yet. Their valuable gold claims had quietly changed hands within days. For years, the residents of Sutters Creek buried this truth deeper than any coffin. Jeremiah's story begins like any other. In a gold rush town, a boy trying to survive in a world ruled by greed and desperation. Sutters Creek, once a sleepy trading post nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills, had exploded into a chaotic boomtown after gold was found in the nearby streams. By 1851, it was home to nearly 800 people, failed farmers, bankrupt businessmen, and fortune seekers from Missouri to Chile, all lured by a dream. 6 months earlier, Jeremiah had arrived with his widowed mother after losing their Ohio farm. She found work as a seamstress. He found it with Silas Fletcher, the town's only undertaker. Small and meticulous, Jeremiah became the perfect assistant preparing the dead and keeping records of every detail, names, causes of death, personal belongings. Death was everywhere: mine collapses, dysentery, shootouts, and exhaustion. What made Jeremiah different was how seriously he took his notes. His private ledger didn't just mirror Fletcher's records. It included his own observations, odd details, missing items, strange injuries. That habit became his curse. He'd grown familiar with many men around town. Magnus Carlsen, the quiet Swedish miner who had just struck a vein. Chen Wei, the kind-eyed Chinese prospector whose nuggets had become talk of the town. Roberto Vasquez, the laughing Mexican miner with a promising claim near Coyote Gulch. All three disappeared. None listed in the death logs. All ended up in Jeremiah's secret ledger. The boy's suspicions truly ignited on a foggy Thursday in April. He was organizing nails in the back room when he heard the heavy thump of a body dragged across the funeral parlor's front porch. He recognized Fletcher's voice, but not the two men with him. Their hushed tones didn't match the usual matter-of-fact talk of miners delivering the dead. Jeremiah pressed his ear to the wall. Found him in his claim. Heart gave out. "You know how older fellows push too hard?" one man whispered. But when Jeremiah peeked through a crack in the door, he saw the unmistakable flannel shirt and thick blonde beard of Magnus Carlsen. He wasn't an old man, only 34. Fletcher asked if there was family to notify. The men said no, paid for a basic burial, left quickly. As Fletcher examined the body, Jeremiah noticed Magnus didn't look like someone who had suffered heart failure. And worse, he had no personal belongings. No leather pouch, no silver pocket watch. Every miner guarded their gold with their life. Shouldn't Magnus have had his pouch? Jeremiah asked. Fletcher gave him a sharp look and replied, "Things get lost. Miners find bodies. Desperate men do desperate things." That night, Jeremiah walked to Magnus's claim near Willow Creek. The Swede had been working a modest stream bed, using the slow, methodical cradling method. What Jeremiah found there froze his blood. Magnus Carlsen's tools lay neatly beside his claim, as if he'd merely paused for lunch. His tin cup still held cold coffee, and a half-eaten piece of bread rested nearby, undisturbed. But the surrounding dirt told a different story. Scattered rocks, scuffed earth, and signs of struggle that contradicted the tale of a peaceful death. Most damning was the discovery Jeremiah made beneath loose gravel Magnus's empty leather gold pouch and his silver pocket watch with its chain violently snapped. As he examined the broken watch, footsteps rustled through the brush. Heart racing, Jeremiah hid behind a boulder, just as the same two men who delivered Magnus's body entered the clearing. "You sure nobody saw us come back?" one muttered. "Relax, Patterson," the other replied. Deputy Thomas Patterson, a name Jeremiah knew too well. The boy listened in horror as they confirmed what he already suspected. Magnus hadn't died naturally. He'd been murdered for his claim, which Sheriff Coleman would soon legally acquire. The men inspected the site to ensure no evidence remained, unaware that a terrified 12-year-old crouched in the dark, clutching stolen proof of their crime. But Magnus's murder was only the beginning. 3 days later, Chen Wei's body arrived at Fletcher's funeral parlor, delivered by unfamiliar men who claimed he died of dysentery. Again, there were no personal belongings despite Chen's well-known gold discovery and the prized jade container he always carried. This time, Jeremiah noticed everything dirt under Chen's fingernails, bruised knuckles, and a tiny puncture wound behind his ear. That night, the boy crept to Chen's canyon camp and found chaos. His tent slashed, belongings ransacked. But beneath a hidden floorboard, Jeremiah unearthed a journal filled with Chinese characters, hand-drawn maps, and diagrams of gold claims, including Magnus's. Though he couldn't read the text, the implications were clear. Chen had been tracking other miners' fortunes. As Jeremiah studied the pages under moonlight, he heard horses. Panicking, he hid in the brush as 5 riders entered the camp. Among them was Sheriff Benjamin Coleman, towering and unmistakable, whose words made the boy's blood run cold. Coleman praised Chen's maps for saving them scouting time and dismissed his murder as the price of greed. When Deputy Patterson asked about a replacement, Coleman mentioned a newly arrived Chinese worker. Perfect, he said, for slipping through the camps unnoticed. Frozen in his hiding place, Jeremiah realized the truth. Sheriff Coleman wasn't upholding the law. He was leading a conspiracy of murder and theft, using informants like Chen to target miners and steal their claims. Now, Jeremiah held evidence of that conspiracy, evidence that could expose the killers or get him buried beside their victims. As dawn broke and the sheriff's men finally rode off into the dark, Jeremiah stumbled back toward Sutter's Creek, his mind reeling. What he'd uncovered wasn't a random killing. It was a coordinated operation designed to identify, rob, and eliminate successful miners, all while disguising the murders through official reports and paperwork. And when he returned to the funeral parlor, the true weight of what he discovered came crashing down. On his pillow lay a crude, block-lettered note with a message as chilling as it was clear. "Some secrets are worth dying for. Keep your mouth shut and your eyes closed, boy." Someone knew. Someone had been watching him. And if he wasn't careful, he might become the next anonymous body carried through Fletcher's doors. But instead of silencing him, the threat only fueled Jeremiah's determination to expose the truth. In the weeks that followed, he transformed from a curious boy into a careful, paranoid investigator. He listened to whispered conversations. In the parlor, studied the faces and voices of those who delivered bodies and compared the official causes of death with what he observed firsthand. His private ledger grew into a damning chronicle of lies. Roberto Vasquez had supposedly died from a rattlesnake bite. Yet Jeremiah found no fang marks, only a deep stab wound in his ribs. James Hicks, the aging prospector from Tennessee, was said to have fallen into a mine shaft. But his injuries didn't match a fall, and his prized coin collection had mysteriously vanished. Patterns emerged. Every victim was a miner who had recently struck gold. They were newcomers with no close family, and their claims had all quietly transferred to new owners, often within days. But the most damning discovery came when Jeremiah began connecting the sheriff to those claims, using whispers gathered through his mother's network of laundresses and seamstresses. Women who worked in the homes of the town's elite, Jeremiah learned that Sheriff Coleman had quietly acquired or now controlled nearly 24 mining claims over the past 8 months, all once owned by men now buried in Boot Hill. Coleman had also built himself a grand home overlooking town, invested in the saloon and general store, and was backing construction on a new hotel. Yet no one questioned his sudden wealth. In a gold town, everyone believed success was just good luck. But Jeremiah knew better. His investigation turned more dangerous the night he decided to follow Deputy Patterson. The man often rode out after dark, claiming to check on remote camps, but Jeremiah suspected otherwise. On a moonless June evening, the boy tailed him silently into the hills along Deer Creek. There at a crossroads, Patterson met 2 other men, ones Jeremiah had seen before at the funeral parlor. Hidden behind a fallen log, he listened as they planned their next kill. Their target was Klaus Weber, a quiet German miner who had recently found a rich quartz vein and intended to return to Germany once he'd earned enough. The perfect victim. Weber's camp is isolated, Patterson said. No neighbors. If he vanishes, people will just assume he left. What about his claim? Asked one of the others, Frank Garrett, a failed prospector turned laborer. Coleman's already filed the paperwork, Patterson replied. Once Weber's gone, it'll be declared abandoned. The sheriff will be the only bidder. The casual way they discussed murder made Jeremiah nauseous. Worse still, he realized Klaus would be dead in days unless someone intervened. But how could a 12-year-old boy convince anyone that the sheriff and his deputies were murderers? No one would believe him. As Jeremiah wrestled with this, he shifted for a better look and accidentally kicked loose several rocks. The small cascade echoed louder than thunder in the still night. What was that? Garrett hissed, hand moving to his gun. Probably just an animal, Patterson muttered, but unease crept into his voice. Let's check it out. The men fanned out, scanning the trees with the practiced caution of trained killers. Jeremiah lay frozen behind the log heart, hammering in his chest as Garrett's boots passed inches from his face. Nothing over here, Garrett called eventually, though doubt lingered in his tone. Let's finish this somewhere else, Patterson said. Too many years in these hills. When the men finally left, Jeremiah didn't move for nearly an hour. He was drenched in sweat despite the cold, his fingers clenched around the edge of the log, as if bracing for death. That night had brought him closer than ever to discovery. But it had also confirmed something worse. Klaus Weber was marked for death, and unless Jeremiah did something, he'd be gone by week's end. The boy's secret investigation had crossed into something far more dangerous, a moral line he could no longer ignore. As Jeremiah made his way back to town through the darkness, he understood that watching from the shadows would no longer be enough. If he wanted to stop the killings and unmask the conspiracy, he had to act. But in a town where justice had been bought and buried, what could a 12-year-old boy possibly do? The answer came not from the living, but from the dead. It began with the arrival of Ezra Whitfield's body on a stifling June morning. Whitfield, a cautious Vermont miner who had recently struck gold near Bear Creek, was pronounced dead from heat-induced heart failure. But Jeremiah, now sharply attuned to patterns, noticed the faint bruising hidden beneath Whitfield's collar, signs of strangulation, not a heart attack. Unlike others, Whitfield had anticipated betrayal. Paranoid and distrustful, he'd sewn a small leather packet into his vest, lining a last-ditch safeguard the killers had missed. Inside was a letter addressed to his brother, written just 2 days before his death. What Jeremiah read changed everything. Whitfield had been conducting his own investigation and had uncovered damning evidence: Sheriff Coleman's sudden wealth tied to reappropriated gold claims, a growing list of victims whose assets mysteriously changed hands, and most chilling of all, the existence of a larger coordinated criminal network. According to Whitfield, Sutter's Creek was only one of several towns where this syndicate operated, eliminating miners and absorbing their land to build a covert empire of blood-stained gold. The sheriff was merely a regional agent of a more powerful figure, known only as the syndicate boss, whose reach stretched from San Francisco to the Sierra Nevada and beyond. The letter also revealed that Chen Wei, the murdered Chinese prospector, had been coerced into working as an informant under threat to his younger brother's life. A demand that ultimately got him killed when he refused further compliance. But the final lines of Whitfield's letter stopped Jeremiah cold. "If I die before mailing this, the boy at the funeral parlor knows everything. He's been watching, and they're watching him too. Protect him if you can. His time is running out." Jeremiah's hands shook as he folded the letter and tucked it under his shirt. Whitfield had known, and now so did others. A creak on the front porch shattered the silence. He blew out the candle and crept to the window, heart hammering as three shadowy figures entered the parlor. Through the walls he recognized Sheriff Coleman, Deputy Patterson, and Frank Garrett. "Fletcher's not here." "Good. We can handle this quietly," Coleman muttered. "You sure the boy doesn't suspect anything?" Patterson asked. "He's been poking around," Garrett replied. "But he's just a kid." Coleman's voice darkened. "Even in a place like this, a dead child raises questions. We need to be smart. They debated methods, mining accidents. Sudden fever, a fall, illness," Garrett said finally. "There's a fever going around. No one will question one more." Coleman agreed. "But we need to act fast. He's too close." Frozen behind the wall, Jeremiah listened as the men plotted his murder, the plan already unfolding around him. Terror clawed at his throat, but his instincts took over. He had proof: Chen's journal, Whitfield's letter, and his own detailed ledger. If he could get those documents into the right hands, someone beyond Sutter's Creek's poisoned reach, he could unravel the entire operation. But he would have to move fast. His death was already being scheduled. Escaping town alive was the first problem. Sheriff Coleman controlled every road, and his network of informants stretched across the entire region. Jeremiah knew he needed help, someone outside the sheriff's reach, someone with just as much to lose. As dawn broke over the Sierra Nevada, casting golden light on Sutter's Creek's quiet facades, Jeremiah made a decision that could either save his life or mark his end. He would find Klaus Weber and warn him of the assassination planned for that night. If they acted together, they might just have the firepower, both literal and figurative, to challenge the rot festering beneath their town's surface. But first, he had to survive the next 24 hours. With Coleman's men already hunting him, the boy slipped out of the funeral parlor through a back window as the sheriff and his deputies finalized plans for his murder. Hidden beneath his shirt were Chen Wei's journal, Ezra Whitfield's damning letter, and his own detailed ledger. Tucked into his boot, his only weapon, a pair of his mother's sewing scissors. He reached Weber's camp in the cool hush before sunrise. The miner was a disciplined man in his 40s, methodically inspecting his tools beside a cabin he had built with his own hands. When Jeremiah arrived, breathless, rattling off stories of murder, stolen claims, and corrupt lawmen, Weber was skeptical until the boy showed him the evidence. Reading Whitfield's letter with the help of a German-English dictionary, Weber paled. "They plan to kill me tonight," he muttered. "Maybe sooner," Jeremiah warned. "Once they find I'm missing, they'll come here." But instead of fleeing, Weber calmly began gathering supplies. A rifle, sticks of dynamite, a strong box of gold, and most importantly, a leather portfolio hidden beneath a floorboard. "Insurance," he said grimly. Inside were letters to his brother in Germany, detailing the crimes he had witnessed. If he died, the letters would be sent to territorial authorities in Sacramento. They had barely finished preparing when hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. It was too late to run. Coleman Patterson. Garrett and 2 hired guns rode into camp, flanking it from every angle. "Klaus Weber," the sheriff called, "come out with your hands visible. We have questions about claim jumping." Weber and Jeremiah exchanged a single look. This wasn't a questioning, it was an execution. "I am a lawful miner," Weber replied, rifle aimed at the tree line. "You want to talk? Bring a warrant." Coleman's laughter was devoid of humor. "You've been working claims that aren't yours, Klaus. That's a hanging offense." What followed was an hour-long standoff with Coleman's men creeping into firing positions while Weber, using his military training from the Prussian army and his deep knowledge of the terrain, kept them at bay. When Garrett tried to flank the cabin, Weber fired a warning shot that sent him scrambling, but also exposed their position. "Take them alive if you can," Coleman barked. "Dead men don't sign claims." But Weber wasn't planning to sign anything. Lighting a fuse, he hurled a stick of dynamite into the creek, blasting rocks and earth into the air and giving them cover to retreat to a fortified position. The gunfight that followed was short and violent. Weber fought with the precision of a soldier, and Jeremiah did what he could to reload and keep the evidence safe. When the smoke cleared, Garrett was dead. 1 gunman fled wounded, and the others had withdrawn. But the price was high. Weber had taken a bullet to the shoulder from Patterson's revolver, and the blood was flowing fast. Worse, the sound of gunfire would draw reinforcements. Boy Weber gasped, pressing a hand to the wound. "You must take the papers. Get to Sacramento. Find Marshal Harrison. He is honest, he can stop this." "I'm not leaving you," Jeremiah said, panic rising in his throat. But Weber's voice, though weak, was firm. "You must. I'll hold them off. The truth must get out. Go now." Jeremiah didn't want to move, but he knew the man was right. If he stayed, both of them would die. If he left, he had a chance to bring justice to the dead. As if to underscore the urgency, the thunder of more hooves echoed through the canyon. Reinforcements, summoned by Sheriff Coleman, likely under the pretense that Weber and Jeremiah were violent fugitives. With no time to argue, Weber shoved his leather portfolio and gold-filled strongbox into Jeremiah's arms. "For expenses," he said, "and proof that I trust you to do right." Tears blurred the boy's vision as he climbed the canyon wall toward a narrow deer trail that would bypass the main roads and lead toward Sacramento. Behind him, Weber's voice rang out defiantly. "I know what you are, Coleman. I have proof, and it's already on its way to men you can't buy." Then came the gunfire, sharp and final, echoing through the Sierra Nevada like the hammer of judgment. Jeremiah didn't look back. Klaus Weber had made his stand not for revenge, but for justice. The boy now carried the burden of truth, but survival would be his next test. Over 3 harrowing days, Jeremiah evaded Coleman's hunters, twice lived off wild berries and stream water, and relied on Weber's crude maps to navigate treacherous mountain trails. At Miller Station, desperate for food and water, he overheard Deputy Patterson spinning lies to the station keeper, accusing a dangerous boy of murdering a respected miner and fleeing with stolen gold. The description of Weber's strongbox was exact. The smear campaign had begun, and it was working. Jeremiah waited for darkness before slipping away and choosing even more remote paths, sacrificing speed for safety. On the 3rd morning, while crossing a river ford just 20 miles from Sacramento, he narrowly escaped again, this time hiding for 4 tense hours in riverside brush. As a search party scoured the area, their leader barking orders to find the boy dead or alive, preferably dead, less questions that way. Soaked and shivering, Jeremiah emerged only after they'd moved on, more resolved than ever. By the time he staggered into the Sacramento Territorial Marshal's office, filthy, exhausted, and clutching Weber's portfolio like a sacred artifact, he looked less like a witness and more like a ghost. But Marshal Thomas Harrison saw something else. A seasoned lawman in his 50s, with a reputation untouched by gold fever, Harrison had built his career on evidence, patience, and incorruptible resolve. His office bore the scars and accolades of 3 decades spent chasing outlaws. At first skeptical, Harrison's expression changed as he examined Chen Wei's journal. Its maps, names, and coded references to payments matching the dates of recorded deaths, and then read Whitfield's letter, which chronicled Coleman's inexplicable wealth and the precise timeline of claim transfers after each suspicious death. But it was Weber's portfolio that turned a local scandal into a territorial crisis. The German miner's letters to his brother didn't just expose Sutter's Creek, they revealed a network of nearly identical operations spread across the gold fields of Northern California, all linked by methods, names, and shadowy financial channels. There was no doubt anymore the murders were part of a statewide criminal syndicate, one that had thrived by exploiting lawlessness and burying the truth until now. Weber had secretly corresponded with other suspicious miners across California, sharing patterns of mysterious deaths and suspicious claim transfers, and it was this web of communication that ultimately cracked the case wide open. This isn't just about one crooked Sheriff Marshal Harrison told his deputy Jacob Sterling as they pored over documents by lamplight. This is organized crime on a scale we've never seen in California. If Weber's letters were accurate, systematic murder was being used to consolidate power and property in at least 8 mining towns. What followed was the most ambitious investigation the Territorial Marshal's Office had ever launched. Harrison assembled a covert team of federal marshals, territorial investigators, and honest local lawmen from towns beyond the reach of Coleman's influence. Working in total secrecy, they verified Jeremiah's evidence and expanded their probe, uncovering a conspiracy far larger than anyone had imagined. Translations of Chen Wei's journal proved critical, far more detailed than initially believed. The notes profiled not just victims, but conspirators as well, including names, roles, and coded connections to businesses, law enforcement, and government officials. The most staggering revelation was the identity of the so-called syndicate boss, mentioned in Whitfield's letter, Cornelius Vandenberg, a powerful San Francisco industrialist who ran mining equipment companies, transport networks, and ore processing facilities across the gold fields. On the surface, Vandenberg was a legitimate businessman. Behind the curtain, he orchestrated targeted killings and fraudulent land transfers to seize control of California's most profitable claims. Rather than trigger a premature collapse of the operation, Harrison made the strategic choice to delay arrests and intensify surveillance. Jeremiah was placed under protective custody in Sacramento, while back in Sutter's Creek, his mother was told he died in a mining accident, a heartbreaking fiction that spared his life by convincing Coleman the trail had gone cold. The deception paid off. Believing both Weber and the boy were dead, Coleman and his men grew bolder, unaware that undercover agents had begun infiltrating their inner circle. Over the next year, the investigation unearthed the full scope of the conspiracy: 47 murdered miners, more than $2 million in stolen claims, and a trail of grief stretching across continents. Families were left destitute, reunion plans, shattered letters from lost fathers and sons abruptly ceased, all casualties of greed, masked as misfortune. By October 1851, with the net fully cast, Harrison initiated the final phase, a series of coordinated dawn raids across Northern California. On October 15th, more than 60 agents struck simultaneously. In Sutter's Creek, Sheriff Coleman was pulled from bed in his silk pajamas, arrested without resistance. Deputy Patterson fled on horseback, only to be caught miles from town by agents who had predicted his escape route. Samuel Briggs Coleman's newest enforcer barricaded himself inside the town jail and held off marshals for 3 hours before being brought down by overwhelming force. But for Jeremiah, the most personal moment came with the arrest of Silas Fletcher. The funeral parlor owner, who had smiled kindly even as he helped conceal murders disposed of incriminating evidence and tipped off Coleman when bodies might cause trouble. The man who had once guided Jeremiah's hand through the rituals of death now found himself handcuffed beside the very graves he had helped to fill. Silas Fletcher's cooperation in the conspiracy had been bought with a steady stream of stolen gold, making him an accomplice to every murder that passed across his embalming table. And when the truth emerged, his name became as reviled as the killers he had quietly aided. The trials that followed dominated California's newspapers for months, revealing a web of greed and betrayal that shocked a nation and shaped territorial law for decades to come. Cornelius Vandenberg, despite his fortune and powerful allies, was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to life in prison, a symbolic blow to the illusion of untouchable wealth. Sheriff Coleman and Deputy Patterson were both sentenced to death and publicly hanged in Sacramento in February of 1852. Their executions attended by hundreds, including families of the miners they had helped murder. For Jeremiah Holbrook, the trials marked both a conclusion and a beginning. Though barely a teenager, he was awarded a substantial reward by the territorial government for his courage. But far more important was what followed. Marshal Harrison, recognizing the boy's gift for observation and his unshakable moral compass, arranged for him to receive a formal education in Sacramento, becoming his mentor-father figure and lifelong guide. Under Harrison's watchful eye, Jeremiah's precision discipline and deep sense of justice, first shown through a child's habit of counting bodies, matured into a formidable talent for investigation. By 25, he had become one of California's most respected federal marshals, specializing in organized crime and corruption, known for his relentless pursuit of truth and incorruptible integrity. Yet Jeremiah never forgot Sutter's Creek. The lessons he learned amid death and deception made him a champion for those most often overlooked immigrants, miners, the poor, those whose deaths too often went uncounted. His office bore a simple plaque with the words that guided his work. Every life counts. Every death matters. The legacy of the Sutter's Creek conspiracy stretched well beyond the courtroom. Federal oversight of mining districts was dramatically expanded. Suspicious deaths now required mandatory reporting to territorial authorities. Congress, galvanized by public outrage, established specialized mining courts to remove claim disputes from the hands of corrupt local sheriffs. The intelligence and surveillance strategies honed during the investigation. Financial forensics, coded communication analysis, multi-district coordination became standard tools in the fight against organized crime in the West. But while laws changed, the town of Sutter's Creek did not escape unscathed. Once a bustling frontier settlement of 800, its population plummeted to fewer than 200 within a year of Coleman's arrest. Main Street fell silent, buildings abandoned, a community hollowed by shame. Yet amid the ruins, efforts were made to remember. A granite memorial in the town cemetery, inscribed with the names of the known victims, bore the words Jeremiah himself had suggested during a quiet return visit, in memory of those who died for gold and in honor of those who lived for justice. Klaus Weber's name stood proudly among them. His claim, once the site of a final stand against corruption, was preserved as a territorial monument, while his letters to his brother, documents that had helped dismantle a criminal empire, were enshrined in a modest museum that told the true story of greed, courage, and sacrifice. Jeremiah's reunion with his mother Sarah brought both joy and heartache. The months of believing her son was dead had aged her, but her pride in his strength became a source of healing. She chose to remain in Sacramento, continuing her work as a seamstress for wealthy families, watching her son grow from the haunted boy of Sutter's Creek into a man feared by outlaws and honored by the law. And though time passed and the gold fever of California faded into history, the story of the undertaker's apprentice, who counted the dead and refused to be silenced, lived on retold in hushed tones in history books alike, a legend born from darkness, forged in truth, and remembered by all who still believed that justice, though often delayed, would never be denied. Newspapers across the nation soon carried accounts of 12-year-old Jeremiah Holbrook's extraordinary role in exposing one of the most far-reaching criminal conspiracies in the American West. His story became legend, retold in dime novels, adapted into stage plays, and etched into the folklore of California's gold rush. But for Jeremiah, legacy meant something deeper than fame. What mattered most was knowing that his quiet vigilance and unwavering commitment to truth had stopped the cycle of murder and greed that had devoured Sutter's Creek. In later years, when asked what had driven him during those perilous months, he always gave the same answer: I couldn't let them keep killing people and pretending it didn't matter. Every person who died deserved to have their story told. His words cut to the heart of the mystery, reminding us that even in the darkest chapters of America's past, when gold fever turned neighbors into predators and entire towns into accomplices, justice could still emerge through the courage of a single voice that refused to be silenced. Jeremiah Holbrook's story endures not because of powerful institutions or celebrated heroes, but because of one ordinary boy who chose to act when others turned away. What do you think? Could a 12-year-old really bring down such a vast and dangerous operation? Let us know in the comments and tell us what you believe drives someone to risk everything for justice. If this tale of courage and corruption moved you, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with a fellow lover of historical mysteries. There are more forgotten secrets buried in the shadows of America's past, and together we'll keep digging until the truth is brought to light. See you in the next video. Thank you all very much for watching my video until the end. I sincerely appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.